Hello and welcome to Business Today Television. I'm Siddharth Zarabi and you're watching our coverage on the expectations for the union budget, likely in the third week of July. And on the show today, we are going to discuss expectations for the agriculture sector, one of the most important as far as the country's economy is concerned, and also very, very significant when it comes to our society as well as our politics. And joining us now, among other guests, is Dr. Ashok Gulati, Distinguished Professor at ICRAER. Dr. Gulati, welcome to the show. We have seen the recent results of the general election and the new government taking two decisions as soon as it came back to power. One was to increase the MSP for Kharif crops this marketing season, and higher MSP for oilseeds and pulses, and also to release one more installment of the PM-KISAN Nidhi. But the big expectation really, Dr. Gulati, is what will this government do and signal in the budget? We have a new agriculture minister, someone who has considerable ground level experience, Shivraj Singh Chauhan. But where do you think the government should try and attempt to re-engage with the farm sector?
Well, I think the best way to engage with the farm sector and the farmers of different states is to initiate a process of creating a sort of agri-council on the lines of GST council, so that you can discuss and debate across states to win the trust of other states, what sort of all India reforms are needed, because one shoe will not fit all the sizes. You know, India is very diverse and cropping patterns are different. The state of Punjab may be demanding very different than the state of Kerala, and so on and so forth. So I think that's the first thing that they need to put in place so that the dialogue and trust building exercise can start. But ultimately, there are two biggest problems that the farmers face. One is the risk of the nature, and the other is the risk of the markets in terms of prices. So how do we ensure that farmer is made somewhat resilient to climate change? If it doesn't rain, or there is a heat wave, or excess rain, and so on and so forth, you need to do two things there. One is invest in agriculture R&D and those practices, farm practices, which are more climate resilient and climate smart agriculture. That's the first thing, and that will need some money, because you need to not only have seeds which are heat resistant varieties, for example, but also that information from the lab has to go to the land. And extension work needs to be expedited. Extension in this country is more or less dead, the public extension. So that needs to be resurrected. Second thing is that the PM Fasal Bima Yojana, the crop insurance scheme, has to be put on a very high priority with quite a bit of technology infusion and minimizing the human intervention, so that there is a trust building with the reinsurers and the insurers. And it is made an automatic scheme wherever there is damage, either because of floods or droughts or heat waves or hailstorms. All these things can be automatically captured. That means a lot of all-weather stations all over the country, and then you have a system where each plot is recognized, digitized, and Jan Dhan accounts of the farmers are locked in with that, so that even without asking, farmers asking for the compensation, it goes directly into their accounts, because you can build a system on that basis. So that's the path how to deal with the nature's risk. But then the other big thing in the demand, as you rightly said, government came up with minimum support prices of Kharif crops. The issue is not just announcing those Kharif crops. How effective is the procurement system as such? Beyond wheat and rice in 5-6 states, it's not a very effective system. Government has not been very proactive in terms of pulses or oilseeds. and pulses and oilseeds we are importing, right? So wheat and rice in particular, we are in abundance. The stocks with FCI are 3.5 times the buffer stock norm.
Right.
But you have to make sure that the farmers do get minimum support prices for pulses and oilseeds. And in fact, you should be rewarding them because they are not consuming too much of water, or they don't consume fertilizers, they are nitrogen fixing. So the incentives that the rice farmers get, a similar package of crop neutral incentive structure needs to be created for pulses and oilseeds, so that subsidy, which is the fertilizer subsidy or power subsidy which the rice farmers get, can that some amount be given to the pulses and the oilseed growers on a per hectare basis, because they are not consuming all these commodities. So
Right.
if you can do that, then you can do justice to the farmers to take care of the nature's risk as well as market risk. So some sort of a stabilization fund to activate the procurement for oilseeds and pulses, maybe 25-30,000 crores will have to be spent on that. Back to you.
We are also joined by Siraj Hussain, former secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture. Mr. Hussain, welcome. We started by discussing what needs to be done for the farm sector. I want to focus on what is the most possible intervention that you see happening, because the interim budget, Mr. Hussain, promised several things, including stepping up value addition in the agriculture sector, boosting farmers' income, direct financial assistance to 118 million farmers, crop insurance for 40 million farmers. So I wonder what is it that you see being possible in this forthcoming budget, because there are a lot of expectations and I am not sure how much of that is going to get delivered. Mr. Hussain, could you hear me? I'll repeat my question. What is realistically possible as far as the farm sector is concerned in the forthcoming budget? Because there's a lot of expectation, particularly with the choice of the agriculture minister that has been made by Modi 3.0. What do you think is likely?
I'm sorry, I did not hear you very clearly. Dr. Gulati is here, he is our guru. So if he has said something, that is the final word. I have nothing to add. However, my own view is that it is very unlikely that a lot of attention will come to agriculture in this budget. I think in this budget, the government will give more emphasis on fiscal consolidation rather than agriculture, rural development and other schemes. Also, there are no major elections nearby which will attract government intervention in the agriculture and rural sector. So I do not foresee any significant enhancement in allocations to agriculture and allied sectors.
Mr. Hussain, what is your own reading of how the sector is likely to perform this year? We have monsoons which are 6 days ahead, although concerns over the manner of the distribution and sort of irregular pattern that we have seen in the past, while they remain, but it does seem to be the fact that the monsoon is well underway and underway in advance.
Today I have written a piece in Money Control, which I have said that even though monsoon was 11% deficient in June, but the good news was that we had good rains in South India, which was reeling under drought last year. So for pulses, sugarcane, coarse grains, it is a good news that the southern states received good rainfalls. Also in the month of June, the northwest region and does not receive very high rainfall because the rains progress from south to north. So a lot depends on what happens in July and August. And if the rainfall is good, if the distribution is good, then I think we will have good Kharif crop. But there is another significant point here about which Jan Rees and Harish Damodran have been writing, and I will request Dr. Gulati to also write about that. The total production of cereals is about 305 million tons, and the consumption is just about 280 285 million tons. Exports are restricted. Even then, we saw double-digit inflation in rice. So this discrepancy has not been explained by any government economist so far. I think Dr. Gulati is the best person to throw light on this.
Dr. Gulati, please take up that point that Mr. Hussain makes.
The demand supply mismatch, what Mr. Hussain is talking about, the production estimates have to be tailored into net production and then how much is being consumed outside home and how much is going into the processing industry. The consumption normally that we get from household consumption surveys is the direct household consumption, and we know very little in terms of how much has gone in for processed food and how much is being consumed from outside home. So this discrepancy, because the processed food is increasing very, very fast, so there is a lot that is going on. It's very difficult to say that the production estimates are totally off the mark. Okay, there could be a tendency that consumption estimates, when you ask the people how much you consume, it's a survey, there is a tendency maybe to give a little less figure, so that we can get even more from the government. All those things happen. So when you adjust for the exports and the processing that is going on and what is going in the feed, because the fastest growing sectors in the economy are the poultry, the fishery, and the dairy, and that's where a lot of cereal is also going into the feed. We don't have exact estimates on how much is going there, and that is what is causing a bit of confusion that, oh, the gap is too big. But I think overall series can be built and we are on it. So it's not too much of a worry. But the fact of the matter is we have huge surpluses of rice and rice exports need to be opened.
That is an important point you make there, because we have seen quite a bit of trouble as far as the frequent imposition of export bans is concerned. Mr. Hussain, I want to take that point itself before I come to you on a question on agriculture subsidies. And this is these frequent bans, and obviously these bans cannot be permanent. Those policy decisions are taken responding to more immediate term concerns. Is that something that will always continue, or can we have a more relaxed attitude as far as exports is concerned?
See, no government would like cereal inflation to be in double digits. And therefore, any government, it could be headed by any party, will resort to these kind of restrictions. The Essential Commodities Amendment Act, which was later on repealed due to farmers' agitation, provided a framework as to when the stock limits on domestic stocks will be imposed. Only when the prices went up by 50% over last year's average or previous 3 years' average. So there is no certainty as to when the stock limits will be attracted for a particular commodity, due to which there is a lot of uncertainty in the market, among the market players, about stocking, about purchasing from farmers and so on. But as far as the exports are concerned, you see, despite the ban on export of white rice, raw rice and broken rice, rice exports last year were 16 million tons as against 21 million tons in the previous year. On diplomatic basis, they have been allowed. So it is not that exports are not taking place. Of course, in case of wheat, exports are totally banned. So it is not an ideal situation, but if the inflation is running in double digits, I think governments will be forced to do something which is not a desirable thing as far as the farmers are concerned.
Absolutely, and that has its own consequences. Mr. Hussain, I want to come to the subject that uh, merits discussion. I don't know how much possibilities exist on account of the politics that surround it, but consolidating all the varied subsidies that are provided through multiple schemes and interventions for the farm sector into something like one consolidated direct benefit transfer, too fanciful a idea to even discuss?
Actually, Dr. Gulati has written a lot about it. The thing is that there is widespread tenancy in India. In Andhra Pradesh, the recorded tenancy is 30%. In Punjab, it is just about 10%. But we know that actual tenancy is much higher, even in Punjab. So, any scheme of DBT will find it very difficult to reach actual tenants, because even PM-KISAN, which is a DBT, reaches only those who own land in their name, whose names are recorded in land records. So the difficulty before the government is how to reach people who are actually cultivating. But having said this, in case of fertilizers, there is a view in the government that if fertilizer subsidy is given directly, there is a possibility that consumption of fertilizers may come down. That is the view expressed by Dr. Ramesh Chand in his writings in the past. I do not know what his view is at present. So that is why fertilizer subsidy has not been taken up through DBT. Now,
Okay.
for electricity subsidy, Punjab Farmers Commission had recommended a DBT for electricity subsidy also, but that also has not been taken up. You see, in case of agriculture, any meaningful reform needs a lot of consensus building between the center and the states. And you know that in the current state of affairs, the federal relations are at rock bottom.
Dr. Gulati, do you therefore share the view that it is unlikely that any such moves can be made, particularly also because land ownership and tenancy tenures are out of the ambit of the union? It is something that perhaps cannot be dealt through with policy intervention.
Well, everything can be straightened out if you give priority to what needs to be done. You want to help the farmers, then give all the subsidies directly to the farmers. That is the basic fundamental principle. Okay? Because you should know that at least 25% of the fertilizer subsidy never reaches agriculture. It is diverted into non-agriculture uses, and whether it is plywood industry or whether it is going in the neighboring countries and so on. Government's own input-output table will give you that. So in a subsidy of 1.88 lakh crores, if 25% is not reaching agriculture, look at the huge leakage. Now, where are the problems if you have to straighten out the things? As Mr. Hussain said, that there is an issue of the owner cultivator and tenant cultivator. Now, tenant cultivator, China has done this. They give it directly, all the subsidies, what you were saying, they give directly to the beneficiaries' accounts and then free up the system. At present, you are hugely subsidizing urea, and the granular urea plant doesn't consume more than 35-40% of it. The rest is going in the environment as nitrous oxide, which is 273 times the carbon dioxide. So you are in a way subsidizing to create poison in the system. Okay? So we need to ensure that this goes directly, and there is an innovation in terms of soluble fertilizers where the nutrient use efficiency can be 90% through fertigation. We are not subsidizing that, but we are subsidizing granular urea, which is creating all these greenhouse gas emissions. Now, how do we resolve the tenant versus the owner problem? There are 2-3 ways in which it can be done. All the plots can be mapped, through the technology, and then the ownership of that through the land records, but land records are not perfect. So you take the help of patwaris and open a portal that those who are tilling on it, they should report that this is the real tillers are these. without owning that, some land laws may have to be changed, but otherwise Andhra Pradesh had done that experiment and giving the certificates to the tenants, so that tenants can also get agriculture credit from the institutions, the banks. At present, tenants are at the receiving end. They get credit at 24%, 36%, whereas the owners may be sitting in Canada or London or Australia. So I think we have to answer this question and we have to streamline. And it can be done given the technology today, provided we have the political will and priority for it.
Mr. Hussain, I want to ask you about the fertilizer question that Dr. Gulati also raises, and add to that, that do you think nano DAP is helping at least reduce import, and perhaps is there some scope for further reforming the way our fertilizer subsidy is being given?
Actually, a lot has been written about the direct benefit transfer of fertilizer subsidy. Dr. Gulati has also written about it. Others have also written. I have also written about it. As far as nano is concerned, I think the scientific validation is still to come, and we get different kinds of reports from various organizations. So I think it is not yet fully established that nano is a game changer. Having said this, it must be said that there is a need to fine tune the subsidy on urea, because there is excessive use in several states, and only 30 to 35% of nitrogen actually reaches the root, and the rest goes into soil and air, which causes air pollution and water pollution. So there is a need, but as I said, the government has found it very difficult because of concern about the loss of production. So that is a fair concern of the government, especially since February of 2022, when a heat wave adversely impacted the wheat crop. And since then, we have seen multiple interventions to ban exports, impose stock limits under Essential Commodities Act, and so on. So I do not think we should expect any serious reform of fertilizer subsidy in near future. As I said earlier, for that you need National Development Council meeting, you need consultation with chief ministers, you need to sit down across the table in a friendly atmosphere and take people on board. Whether that is likely to happen or not, I leave it to your viewers to decide.
That's a very, very important point. Dr. Gulati, the PM-KISAN Nidhi has become one of the most headline grabbing schemes because of the way the release also happens, installment. The government also tries to derive full mileage out of it, and we end up focusing on that. I want to ask you, at 60,000 odd crore, the outlay that we have, is there need to further expand this outlay, or would you be one of those who would say that ultimately it will end up not doing much for the sector? It will help the farmer consume a bit, but won't actually do any structural changes?
First let's take what was the basic idea behind this PM-KISAN when it was introduced in 2019. Actual recommendation was that all subsidies should be put together and given as an income support to the farmer. But as you have heard, there are difficulties in terms of how to give it to the owner cultivator, tenant cultivator, and so on and so forth, and the fee. It requires a good spade work to be done for 6 months, 1 year, before you can do this transfer from price subsidization to income support. So what was done in hurry, that was the 2019 election time, that this was announced as an additional, in a way, a freebie to help the farmer. But it was only to the households who are owners of land. So the tenants are still out of it. And 25 to 30% tenancy in the country doesn't get that. And many of these owners. Secondly, it's not on per hectare basis, it is on per household basis. So the better off farmers who are maybe tilling larger parcels of land, they don't get it. So I would say it's only a halfway progress into income support. Also 2019 6,000 today is less by 25-30% at least in terms of real value. So if you want to maintain the same level in terms of real value what it was in 2019, you need to raise this to at least 8,000 if not 10,000. So that's the way. But income support always is better than the price support, because price support creates massive distortions in the market, and those inefficiencies, like in fertilizer, inefficiency in the use of fertilizers outweigh the benefits that the farmers may get from it. So I would always plead for income support, but you have to prepare it well and make it inclusive in terms of bringing on the tenants onto this.
Absolutely. Viewers, this is just a very small sort of window into the issues that bedevil our farming sector. It's very complex. It is massive, it is gigantic, and there are multiple challenges that need to be dealt with, and perhaps linking it to just one budget is a fallacy, because many of the improvements that are required will need to be done over time. We'll wait for the union budget and see how it carries forward the message from the interim budget and try and connect with our experts at that time as well. For now, I want to thank Mr. Suraj Hussain and Dr. Gulati for their time with us today. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of NDA Nomics, our budget coverage. We'll be back with more. Until then, goodbye.
On the penultimate day of campaigning before UK votes, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak kicked off his day with a visit to the vast Ocado warehouse in Luton, north of London, watching robots pick items for delivery. Badly lagging in the race to win Britain's election, the Tories, after 14 years, are scrambling to put the house together. These years have been marked by a sluggish economy, declining public services, and a series of scandals cornering Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party, an easy target for critics on the left and the right. The poster boy of the Tories have now started to remind voters of the perils of a Labour government, as the polls show them miles ahead of him.
I know you're frustrated with me, frustrated with our party. Hasn't been an easy few years for anybody. I get all of that. And in particular, if these polls are right and Labour are in power with a supermajority, you have to think about what that will mean. A government, a Labour government, unchecked. No one to hold them accountable, no one to stand up to them in Parliament, and all of the impact it would have on all of your lives. And I say this to you, if you hand Labour a blank cheque, you will not be able to get it back.